So good evening. We are back to the Spirit's book. Last week we read and commented a little on 963, but we didn't. And this item is only two questions. So I'm going to ask Philip to read both 963 and 964, and then we comment on everything.
963. Is God personally concerned with each person? Is God not too great, and are we not too small for each individual to be of any importance to the Creator? God is concerned with all of creation, no matter how small they may be. Nothing is too small or insignificant for God's goodness. 964. Is God concerned with each of our actions to reward or punish us? Aren't most of such actions insignificant to God? God's laws apply to all your actions, and if you violate them, it is your fault. When a person violates one of those laws, God does not say, "You have been gluttonous. I will punish you for it." However, God has set a limit. Diseases and even death are the consequences of overstepping that limit. Anytime you are disciplined, it is a result of violating a law. Everything happens that way. All our actions are subject to God's laws. Any wrongdoing on our part, no matter how inconsequential it may seem to us, is a violation of those laws. When we experience the consequences of such violations, we can only blame ourselves, as we are the sole architects of our happiness or misery, as is shown in the following narrative. A father has educated and instructed his child on how to guide himself in life. He hands over a piece of land to him to farm and says, "I have given you the practical directions and all the necessary tools for making this land productive and earning a living. I have given you all the instruction needed for understanding those directions. If you follow them, your land will yield abundant harvests, and you will be able to rest in your old age. If you do not, it will bear nothing, and you will die of hunger." Having said this, he leaves him to his own devices. Is it not true that the land yields crops corresponding to the skill and care invested in its cultivation, and that any mistake or negligence on the part of the sun has a harmful effect on the harvest? Therefore, the son will be comfortable or poor in his old age, depending on whether he has followed or neglected his father's directions. God is even more farsighted. We are told at every moment whether we are doing right or wrong through the spirits that are sent to guide us, although we do not always listen to them. There is also the difference that if the son wasted his time, he has no opportunity to repair his lapses, while God would always give him the means of correcting his mistakes through new lives.
Okay, thanks, Philip. So when we discuss, first, the item is called Intervention of God in Rewards and Atonements. And we discussed a little bit this last week. The conception of God in the mid-19th century generally was really a humanization of God. So the question in itself is Kardec thinking of God as human-like, and how one person can be personally involved. Concern here is in the sense that is preoccupied with each person in the world. And as I said last week, we need to move away from this conception of humanizing God, and we need to think of God as the creator of a universe that is so big and so large that we cannot even conceive and understand how God creates and participates in the creation at all times. But what we know is that God created natural laws, perfect laws, that, like the law of cause and effect. So everything that we do has an effect. Every action that we take, there is a reaction, on the good side, on the bad side. So as we accept and understand that, we can see how God is present in everything that we do, because God's law is imprinted on our conscience, as we learned before, the Spirit's book. So every action that we make is following the natural laws of the creation. Now, when we violate the natural law, we are not being personally punished by God itself. It is just a consequence of the law of cause and effect. So if you, as they say here, God wouldn't say, if you are gluttonous, I'll punish you for it. The natural law says that created our physical bodies. It says that if we abuse our physical bodies, there'll be consequences for it. We'll have to face the consequences of the damage that we are doing to our physical body. It's not a punishment, it's the law of cause and effect. And as Kardec goes on the explanation here, that God is like a father that educated and instructed us how to guide ourselves in our own conscience. The way that how we act and how we behave and how we use the resources that are given to us is our own responsibility. And the consequences of our actions are also our own responsibility, based on our responsibility. The difference between the story that is said here of someone that wastes his life and dies of hunger is that God gives us endless opportunities in form of reincarnations, in form of opportunities to repair the mistakes, of repeating the experiences. So eventually, as the law is of progress, we will learn from our mistakes and we will evolve. How long it will take depends on each one of us and depends on our desire to overcome the challenges and imperfections that we are faced with. So this is the best we can explain according to the creation, but it is very important for all of us to try to move away from this humanization of God, try to understand God according to how we understand humankind, because there is nothing to compare with us. Of course, when it is said that we are created at His image, people have to normally take the literal interpretation of it and imagines God as an old guy sitting in a throne. But because we are creations of God, of course we reflect God in the creation, but not in the sense that we have understood throughout times, but in the sense that we are creation of God, so we are consequence of God's creation. Okay? Questions, comments? We are moving in a completely different direction. So if you have any questions about God, it's here now in these two questions. No? Okay. Philip, move on. Nature of future joys and sorrows.
Do the joys and sorrows of the soul after death have any material aspect? Common sense tells you that they cannot be of a material nature because the soul is not matter. There is nothing carnal in those joys and sorrows, yet they are 1,000 times more vivid than those you experience on earth, because the spirit, when freed from matter, is more sensitive. Matter stifles feelings and sensations.
Okay. Paco is not here today to ask me to say in English, right?
English.
So, first we have to understand here, joys and sorrows are felt by the spirit, not by the physical body or by the spiritual body, the perispirit. The emotions are in the spirit. They are not in matter. So the spirits tell us, common sense tells you that cannot be of a material nature because the soul is not matter. We know the soul is not matter. And everything that comes from universal fluid is everything that we find in the universe comes from the universal fluid, except God and the spirits or the soul or the intelligent principle. So when we no longer have a physical body, the joys and sorrows are experienced 1,000 times more vivid because our physical body, like we discussed many times here, distracts us from some of the mental anguishes that we go through. We have to sleep, we have to eat, we have to take care of our physical body, and when we are back in the spiritual world, it's just us and our minds. So everything is amplified, and it's very dangerous that we fall into the imperfections and the sorrows that our mind bring to us. So that's what the spirits were trying to say here, that the joys and sorrows do not have any material aspect because they are not in the physical or spiritual bodies. They are in the soul, in the spirit. So it survives death of the physical body and continues into the spiritual world, again, not in the perispirit, but in the spirit itself. Okay.
Read.
Yeah.
Why do people often form unrefined and absurd ideas of the joys and sorrows of the future life? Because their intelligence is still imperfectly developed. Does a child understand things to the same capacity as an adult? Besides, their idea of a future life is often a result of the education to which they have been subjected, an education that urgently needs to be reformed. Your language is too incomplete to express what transcends your present existence. So we have to communicate with you using comparisons borrowed from that existence. As a result, you have mistaken images and figures for reality. As humanity becomes enlightened, its thought understands much that its language is unable to express.
So what is Kardec talking about here? Unrefined and absurd ideas of joys and sorrows. We can give a very simple answer: heaven and hell. Right?
Yeah.
So because the definition of heaven is eternal joy, the definition of hell, eternal sorrow. So our intelligence, as the Spirit says here, we behave like children that do not understand the idea of a future life, of have an understanding of future life as an adult. Meaning, our future life is really us back in the spiritual world, exactly how we were the day before we went back to the spiritual world, without a physical body and on a different plane of existence. So there is no heaven or hell, eternal damnation or eternal joy. It's just a continuation of our life, because we never die, we are eternal. But the spirits also tell us our language is not complete. They cannot fully express what is life in the spiritual world, because we don't have language to explain. So they explain what we receive is comparisons that are borrowed from our physical life. And of course, we interpret these images and figures as reality. We still do that with many of the passages of the gospel. Many people still interpret them literally. And that's where you enter into a lot of problems that you see there. People following the written line to the law. And of course, we discussed this in many different classes with the translations, with the limitations of language. We really cannot take everything that is written to the letter. We have to interpret. We have to try to understand. We have to try to go beyond what's written, and that's what we have a full book on Spiritism called the Gospel According to Spiritism. So we, of course, in Spiritism, we have moved away from these conceptions of heaven and hell, because to us here, it should sound absurd, these ideas of heaven and hell. Even the church, the previous Pope said that heaven and hell is inside our own minds. So they are slowly starting to move away from the idea of heaven and hell as a defined place, a physical place, but more moving towards a state of mind, which is really, if you want to use heaven and hell in Spiritism, that's perfectly fine, as long as you associate that with your state of mind and with a temporary state of mind, because you may live in hell for a while, but you can overcome this state of mind and move to a better one. And you are living until you become a perfect spirit, and we are going to talk about this in the next question. The idea of eternal happiness, it has to be understood in the content of where we are in our evolutionary path. So that's why we talk a lot in Spiritism about relative happiness, which is the happiness we can achieve at our present state of evolution. Yes, Dani.
I'm trying to understand here a little better what he means by the last sentence. As humanity becomes enlightened, its thought understands much that its language is unable to express. It means the verbal language?
Yes. So as we evolve, we are going to be able to understand better things, sometimes without the necessity of language, but also we have to consider the language evolves, right? So, in the time of Kardec, if you talk about a cell phone, you'll be met with a blank face. You go to some places in primitive civilizations that still exist on Earth, and you cannot try to explain them what we have in civilization, right? So the idea is that as we evolve, we become more enlightened, and we will understand more in terms of the language, what language nowadays is unable to express, that may be able to express, or maybe not even be necessary to express. Okay. Yes. Anyone else? Okay. So let's see what perfect spirits have.
What does the happiness of good spirits consist of? In knowing all things, feeling neither hatred, jealousy, envy, ambition, nor any of the passions that make human beings miserable. Their mutual love is a source of supreme happiness. They have none of the wants or anxieties of material life and are happy in the good they do, because the happiness of spirits is always proportionate to their degree of elevation. Only perfectly pure spirits enjoy the highest happiness. However, others are happy on different levels. Between bad and perfect spirits, there is an infinite range of elevation and happiness, as the joy of each spirit is always proportionate to its moral state. Those who have already achieved a certain degree of advancement have a perception of the happiness of those who are further along. They seek higher happiness, but as an object of emulation rather than jealousy. They know that it is solely up to them to reach it, and they work to that end with the tranquility of a good conscience. They are happy in not having to suffer what inferior spirits endure.
So when we talk about perfected spirits, as Julio prefers to call them, it's difficult for us to understand what a perfected spirit is, because we have to eliminate all the passions of humankind that we feel. But for us to eliminate all the passions, really, it would leave an emptiness, because we don't have the capacity of understanding us as evolved beings without these sentiments. Having only the sentiment of perfect love, which we barely understand as it is. So what we can do here is try to understand what the spirits tell us. That mutual love is a source of supreme happiness. There is no hatred, no jealousy, no envy, no ambition. We, at this stage, very difficult for us to understand not having ambition, because ambition moves us, makes us try to be better, to have better material life conditions. And when we are in the spiritual world, to want to evolve, to be better, it's also an ambition in itself. So not having the ambition, again, it's another thing that for us is difficult to understand. We can more or less have the concepts of not having hatred, jealousy, or envy. We still have these imperfections, but we can imagine, and we see people that have less of those imperfections. But when we look at perfect spirits, that they have no wants or anxieties, the definition that the spirits give us of the perfected spirits in the degrees of spirits is that they work together with God, they are co-creators of the universe. And this is very beautiful, but we don't have the capacity to understand what that means, right? We can barely understand creation. How can we understand the participation of the spirits? But it's important for us to know that that's the state that we are all going to get one day as we continue evolving and we are going to reach perfection. That work for them is a source of pleasure, of happiness. So they work all the time, because when you work, there is no tiredness of work, because there is no mental anguish for the work. It's a work that gives them happiness all the time, so they never stop working. But again, work is also a word that we associate with physical effort. We still need to learn, or we need better words to define what is work in the spiritual level for this sort of spirits. So their happiness is in working all the time, in not having inferior sentiments, and in helping those that are below them to evolve. I don't think we can say anything else beyond that, because it's still so far away from us that when we try to put all these qualities in place for one in a human being, that's what we can relate, it makes it almost impossible. So let us just try to understand the target that we all have, which is to reach this perfection. And what do we need to reach that? We need to evolve intellectually a lot, but morally, we need to overcome the imperfections. We need to overcome our inferior sentiments. So to work on those inferior tendencies every day is the way that we are going to progress faster. We are always progressing. So even if we decide not to make any effort, we are learning that not making any effort is not good for us. So eventually we'll look back and regret the lost time. So someone asked me a question here. If we are eternal and we learn both in the physical and spiritual world, why we're not able to access all the previous knowledge that we acquired in our previous incarnations? So we discussed this, and this is a question that always comes. As we are always evolving, of course, this version of ourselves is the best version we ever had. So sometimes we cannot even deal with the problems of this present existence. We have some regrets that we would rather forget than having them with us. Now, if we start to accumulate all the remembrances of previous existences, all the mistakes we made in previous existences, it will become such an overwhelming, guilty sensation that would prevent us from moving further. So, are we going to remember? Yes. As we evolve and we become more and more aware of our imperfections and overcome our imperfections and are able to deal with the mistakes we made in the past without causing any harm to ourselves, then we'll start remembering our previous existences. So the idea here, the natural law protects us from ourselves, which is the inability to access our primitive incarnations and our inferior incarnations where we were barbarians or post-barbarians, and we just have to look at history and see all the things that happened throughout history, and think that we were there somewhere in some of those horrible things that we did to each other throughout incarnations. We were there either as persecutors or victims. So in the way, we are carrying either the hatred to those that persecuted us, or the guilty for having persecuted others. And it's very difficult to deal with those remembrances if we carry them. So it's important for us at our stage to forget about our past. But a perfect spirit, talking about them, we're here. Of course, they know their whole journey since creation. How can they do that? How can they access everything? I don't have the answer. I don't know. The spirits haven't explained to us, because I don't think we even have words to describe it. But what they told us is, yes, when you become a perfected spirit, on the process of becoming, you are going to remember more and more of your previous existences. It's like when when your mother tells you something that you did when you were 2 years old, something stupid that you did, and you have no guilty for that, because you know now that when you were 2 years old, you didn't know better. And so when we are able to deal with our spiritual infancy, in a way, we are going to start remembering it. Okay? Danny, yes.
Would it be the same if we remembered the spiritual world's life? Like, I know we come from different maybe stages or experiences when we go back, and that can change. I imagine we don't go back to the same places all the time, right? Like, we might be in a different places or living different kind of experiences every time we go back. So because there is this enigma, or this question that a lot of people answer, questions like asks, like, how is the spiritual world? And it is so sort of a mystery around that. If we could remember at least the spiritual life, it would be much easier. Right?
Oh, okay.
Yes, but the explanation from the spirits, why don't we, if we all come from the spiritual world, we were living in the spiritual world, how come we don't remember that we were in the spiritual world, right? Well, there's not a simple explanation for that. What we discussed last week, those that do not believe, or actually we discussed, I don't know if it was last week or it was Sunday, those that, I think it was Sunday on the way to the light, the materialists, right? Those that do not believe in God. It is a rational choice. It is not instinctive. We bring with us the instinctive notion of spiritual life. Because if you look at the majority of people in the world, they believe in a survival of the soul in some form. Maybe going to heaven, to hell, or any other things, but most people in the world, and I think it's more than 80%, according to what I last read, believe in the survival of the soul. So they are spiritualists in the broader sense of the word. So if 80% believe in that, and of these 80%, there is a lot of people that doesn't go to churches, doesn't follow any religion. So why do they believe in the survival of the soul? Because it's instinctive. It's there. It's our instinctive remembrance of the spiritual world. Now, again, the majority of us go through the process of reincarnation without being part of the of the planning, and without being aware that we are coming to a new reincarnation. So the time we spend in the spiritual world doesn't create a strong impression in our subconscious, let's say, because that's what we bring to the physical world. Those that come here and come with a more planned incarnation and that are going to work in their spiritual growth are much more connected to their existence in the spiritual world, even if they don't remember. The process of reincarnation, the 9 months, the connection with the perispirit losing its form, and the state of confusion that follows the 9 months that you go through the process of the reincarnation in the womb of the mother. All this affects the spirit in a way that we don't have the full explanation, in a way that makes the spirit forget what it had experienced in the spiritual world. Elmo. Go ahead, Elmo. Elmo raised his hand, but I don't know what's going on.
I have a problem here.
Okay, we can hear you now.
You can?
Yes.
Okay, good. So if I leave my physical body today and return to the spiritual world, regardless of where I go in the spiritual world, I will identify myself as Elmo. I will identify my life, my problems, my hates, my everything as Elmo, right? Although I'm much more than Elmo, but I can only identify myself as Elmo. That's the only identity that I have. That means that if I return in the following incarnation, remembering of my time in the spiritual world, it equal to remember completely my identity in the previous existence, all my hates, all my loves, all my everything else. So that would not work. If the value of if the value of forgetfulness is a useful tool for us to start as a empty canvas, so we can make a much better picture of ourselves. To remember the time that I spend in the spiritual world equals to remember my identity of the previous incarnation, know my problems and everything else. So that would not work. Does it make sense?
Yeah, for me, it makes perfect sense. Danny, we're good? Yeah, okay. Yes, absolutely. So it's a very good point, Elmo. Yeah. We will bring with us the remembrance of our previous existence if we did that. Yeah. Yeah. Again, the continuation of the previous question, the knowledge is never lost. We just don't have the ability to access it in the natural thinking process. Yes, everything that we have learned is always with us. The moral evolution, comes with us in a new incarnation. The intellectual evolution may come with us partially or limited according to our needs in our new incarnation. But the moral evolution that we have stay with us forever. So once you learn to be patient, you are never going to lose your patience again. So in no incarnation, we'll bring our patience throughout the incarnations. But the intellectual abilities, we don't bring them in a new incarnation sometimes because we need to learn different things and move in different directions, and the knowledge that we have may hinder our evolution in a present incarnation. Okay. Okay.
You stated that the absence of material wants is one of the conditions of happiness for spirits. Is it not the satisfaction of these wants a source of joy for people? Yes, it is an animal pleasure. When people cannot satisfy those wants, they are tortured by them.
Okay, so it's a short question, but the other one is completely different. So we have to talk a little bit about this. Material wants in our present life is a condition of happiness, yes, because for us to live in a comfortable life in peace with ourselves, we need what we can call material wants. So we learn in Spiritism the maxim, without charity there is no salvation. But in order for us to practice charity, to be useful to others, to help others, we need to be well within ourselves, because if we are desperately in need of something, we don't have things to eat, we are worried because we don't have a job, we don't have money, our health is compromised, anything that disturbs our physical existence prevents us from being of service to others. So material wants is a condition of happiness in the sense that it should be used in the sense that allows us to be of service to others. Now, of course, we know that's not the case. A lot of people have the material wants because of the material wants. But these are the people that are going to struggle eventually when they go back to the spiritual world. And everything that they accumulated here stays here. And the moral and intellectual evolution that they may have not acquired goes with them, the lack of it, and they are going to struggle in the spiritual world. So again, Spiritism teaches us always that it's important for us the satisfaction of our physical needs, the needs to have a happy existence, a happy life, in order to be in a good state of mind to be able to work for our moral and intellectual evolution, which is the ability to help others, to be of service to others. Okay, it's very important. It's a short question and answer, but it's very important for us to understand that, because this is a very conflicting thought that when we start studying Spiritism comes to our minds, right? Because we learn that our life is not here, it's not this life, it's the life in the spiritual world, that what is important is our spiritual involvement. And many people decide to leave behind any desires for a happy material life, and we just have to go a little deeper into Spiritism and study a little bit Spiritism to understand that the importance of us taking good care of our physical body and of our material needs is because based on that we are going to be in better conditions to be of help and assistance to others. Okay? We're good there? Yeah, okay.
969. What does it mean when people say that pure spirits are united in God's heart in active devotion? This statement is an allegorical representation of the knowledge they possess with regard to God's perfections. They see and understand God. However, you must not interpret this metaphor any more literally than other statements of a similar nature. Everything in nature, from the grain of sand up, is devoted, meaning proclaims God's power, wisdom, and goodness. You must not assume that high spirits are absorbed in eternal contemplation, which would be an unwise and monotonous happiness, and furthermore, a selfish one, because their existences would be of perpetual uselessness. They no longer undergo the tribulations of corporal life, an exemption that is a joy in itself. As we said, they know everything. They make use of the intelligence they have acquired in helping the progress of other spirits. They find great joy in this occupation.
So, back on the subject that we don't understand much. Pure spirits or perfected spirits. We spoke a little bit that they work in connection with God. They are co-creators in the sense of creating the universe with God, because in truth we are all co-creators, because every action that we perform has an effect on the creation as a whole. So of course we don't have the ability to see ourselves as co-creators in the sense of God's creation. But what we learn from Spiritism is that pure spirits or perfected spirits work in connection with God as co-creators in God's creation. Now, as we don't have the ability to understand what is this perfect happiness, or what is this presence of God in everything, in every part of the creation, we start making assumptions on how it would be to be a perfect spirit. And the answer from the spirits are clear, that it's really a mistake to assume that the perfect spirits are in eternal contemplation, because that will be boring, of course, that will be selfish, and the existence will be useless. So that we can understand. As we understand our need to evolve and our role as eternal spirits, we can understand that the idea of reaching a point and having nothing else to do kind of makes absolutely no sense. The more we evolve, the more we are going to have things to do, and the more important things to do. Now, what they say here is that they no longer undergo the tribulations of corporeal life, and that's very important. The reincarnation process ends when we become a perfected spirit. So, reincarnation is an evolutionary process that is needed for all spirits until they reach perfection. Once they reach perfection, there is no longer need of reincarnating. They can incarnate, like our Master Jesus did, in special circumstances and special situations according to what's necessary. And again, we understand the teachings of Jesus and the lessons that he left to us, but to question the necessity of his incarnation here on earth, we don't have this ability or knowledge to question it. But we know, and it's important here, it's important to understand that a perfect spirit can incarnate, not reincarnate, but incarnate as needed. And because of that, we also conclude that a perfect spirit still has some form of perispirit attached to it, because without the perispirit, you cannot incarnate. So when we study the perispirit, we talk about the perispirit. We hear people saying that once you become a perfected spirit, you no longer have a perispirit. And according to our understanding, if you need a perispirit to incarnate, you need to have a perispirit when you are perfected spirit. So in case you need to reincarnate, and we know that every world has a spirit that is responsible for it, like Jesus is the governor of our planet. So we can imagine that it was not only Jesus, a perfect spirit, that incarnated. Other perfect spirits have incarnated somewhere else, and also they need the perispirit. So, Daniela, you have a question.
This is a question that I always have had about the perfect spirits. So there is nothing else to, they reach a point when there is nothing else to learn? Or because I maybe it's very, I'm associating learning with this very physical life. Like, you know, we learn and then we grow and then we learn. So it helps us to get better and evolve. But don't they are like done with learning and then they're satisfied, like no more books? Or
that's a very good, yeah, that's a very good question.
This question has always bugged me.
Yeah, and the best answer that I got for this question, because this is a question that bothered me a lot also, because you know, the law of progress means that you are constantly evolving. But what happens to a perfected spirit? Where is the law of progress? And the best answer I heard was actually from Haroldo Dutra. First I'm going to answer someone posted that maybe God is always evolving. No, God is perfect. If God is evolving, wouldn't be perfect. So if God is perfect, God is not evolving. God is, like Julio says always, God is. There is no change in God because it's already perfect. But us, so you imagine two lines that you are getting closer and closer and closer, but you never become one, because if you become one, you become God, right? Understand the concept here? So two lines that are moving towards each other, but never become one. They're always approaching, but there is always something between these two lines. Mm-hmm. That's God and perfect spirits. They are getting closer and closer and closer and closer and closer, but never become God. So there is always something more to learn. So they are already perfected spirits, perfect spirits, pure spirits, but they will continue learning. And for us, it's hard because we think of perfect spirit reaching the end of it, right? You are perfectly morally and you are perfect intellectually. So what else is there to learn? But the understanding that we have is that they continue to evolve, and that's according to the law of progress. It makes sense according to the law of progress. According to the law of progress, all God's creation continue progressing eternally. But that's as far as we can get, Danny, because it's hard to go beyond that.
There's hope for us.
Carol.
We might have.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. If God is already in existence and creating, the universe is constantly expanding. Therefore, all the souls have space, have room to do whatever they need in their evolutionary progress. So, yeah, I think it works that way too. I think it works.
Yeah. And again, I think it's hard for us to try to understand that at our level of evolution and of understanding, because we can barely understand spirits that are not even perfect. But you look at even some spirits that are closer to us that we admire profoundly, but we have trouble imagining what would be to live like them. We cannot think of ourselves of living like them. You know, you think of someone like Divaldo, who with 92 years old that used to travel 200 days a year, giving lectures everywhere and doing the work that he does. We can admire, but can we do what he does? No. It's at this level of our evolution, it's difficult for us to understand. So you take him and you go all the way up to a much more evolved spirit. We can't even imagine or relate to it. So it's hard for us. It's the best we can do is try to make to keep our minds open to more information and more learning, because that's going to come, and not to try to reach conclusions here, definite conclusions, because we don't have enough information to reach definite conclusions. What we have is sorts of information that comes from the Spirit's book, that comes from the Spirits, and from them we can reach conclusions. But these conclusions are based on what we know, and they have to be able to evolve also as we evolve. And that's what Spiritism always tells us. You know, keep learning, keep evolving, keep adding information. Okay, adding knowledge, not information. Okay, we're 7:28. I'm not going to go to the next question, Philip. Any other comments? We start next week with suffering of inferior spirits.
Johnny.
Yes, Luis.
My personal perspective is that we know very, very, very little about the perfect worlds. You guys are going to throw stones at me, but I think we cannot even say that Christ is a perfect spirit. We know it's a very, very, very elevated spirit, but I mean, it's such a distance from us. We have so little information regarding what happens there. So I think everything we say is sort of speculation.
Yeah. Just going back to the information we have from the spirits, that Christ is a perfect spirit, yes. But also the information, more information for you is, if Jesus or Christ is the governor of this planet, there are governors of the solar system. So you think of a governor of the solar system as being more evolved than Christ. But if Christ is perfect already, so more evolved, it just shows us that the evolution continues.
Yeah, and
then,
don't forget that we have 2 or 3 trillion galaxies, each one with 200 billion to 400 billion stars, suns. So there are a lot of galaxy governors as well.
Yes, absolutely. So, and again, it's if we start, we're never going to get anywhere with these discussions at the moment. So we have to deal with the knowledge that we have, and you know, as more knowledge comes, we absorb more knowledge and try to study more. But again, like something that I don't remember exactly who said. How does this changes what we are doing today to help us be better than we were yesterday? So knowledge always helps, but up to a certain point, we need to keep accumulating knowledge and trying to learn more, but always very concerned with not wasting precious time in trying to understand things that are beyond our capacity or our need for today. Again, I know it's not it's something that can be discussed, but it's important for us to always use what we have to help us make us better every day of our existences. So a lot of these theoretical discussions are very good, very nice, but we have to know when to to draw a line there that it takes us to a place that we're not going anywhere with it. Anyway, we have to stop here. So just a reminder of what we have this weekend. We have on Saturday a talk on the United States Spiritist Federation by Tanya Stevanin. Tanya is a dear friend from London that we met 25 years ago when we were living there, and she was beginning to study on her master's in microbiology. Now she has a PhD in microbiology, and she also has a diploma in psychology. And she opened the Spiritist Center in Sheffield, first person to bring Spiritism to Sheffield, UK. So she's going to be talking about the end of the world and how to survive it. And someone asked me when we posted that on Facebook. So this means that the world is going to end. So my answer was, watch the lecture. But also on Sunday, we have the continuation of our series of lectures on fundamentals of mediumship. Elmo is going to present mediumship of physical effects. So all of you that are curious about poltergeists, haunted houses, and turning tables, Elmo is going to explain all of this to us on Sunday, 11 a.m. Okay? And I think that's all for us today. So the second part, we're going to study the Medium's book. Elmo is back with us for the Medium's book today. Carol, can you do our final prayer, please?
Sure. Infinite Creator and Supreme Intelligence, we are grateful for the opportunity this evening to be together on our Zoom. We are grateful for what we have received through our spiritual benefactors, through the good spirits, through the mentors of SGNY. We are grateful for their presence, allowing us to receive the blessings, the guidance, the courage, and the forward motion of our activities. We are grateful for the studies this evening of the Spirit's book, for the topic of rewards and atonements and the law of cause and consequence, helping us to understand this aspect of creation. We are actually creating our happiness or unhappiness as we follow the natural laws. These are God's laws. The law of cause and consequence will be residing within us to help us, to guide us, to bring us forward with goodness, with charity, with love in action. Our soul is not made of matter. The spirit feels these joys and these sorrows more vividly when in the spirit world. We know that we have to remain in a balanced position or poised position when we have a physical body, knowing that we have to attend to the matters of this world. However, we keep our focus into the higher realms of spirit, helping us to balance the intellectual and the spiritual aspects of our life. We will gain happiness, true happiness, when we become perfected spirits. Then we will become the co-creators with God. As we close this meeting this evening, we humbly ask to receive the love and light of Christ within. May it go deeply within our hearts so that we can be of service, greater value to those who are around us, and allowing ourselves to be an active participant in our world. We close now and ask to continue with our prayers, with our studies and mindfulness throughout the week. May we receive this love and light within through the Christ light, and may we be of service as we go forth as beacons of light. Go forth now in peace, so be it.